Members of the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Climate Action, Brid Smith, People Before Profit TD for Dublin South Central, and also here Timmy Dooley, Fianna Fáil TD and party spokesman on the environment and natural resources. Good morning to you both. Brid Smith, this committee, I gather that you're both members of it, met in closed session on Tuesday. I mean, is there a final text? We've seen various drafts of it leaked.
I'm not looking at anyone in particular, but yeah, I believe there have been text leak. It changes. There's constantly been changes and amendments to it. But I think the significance of the children coming to the school children coming to the dial tomorrow can't be understated, because this kind of puts a manners and a pressure on those of us inside to get on with it and get things done. But I think it also should make a very strong statement to the political class that they need to take the demands of the kids seriously. The top demand they have is to leave all fossil fuels in the ground, and at the moment the government are foosting around with a bill that I have, that Timmy and Fianna Fáil supported thankfully and hopefully will continue to do, but they're holding it in limbo. The very chairperson of the Climate Committee is holding it in limbo. That's the first demand the kids make: leave all fossil fuels in the ground. That's what the bill tries to do. So I think the committee needs to make its report, but I'm a bit disappointed. I think I will be disappointed about the final product, because I don't think it goes far enough.
Timmy Dooley, a lot of talk about a fourfold increase in carbon tax, bringing the levy up from €20 per tonne to €80 per tonne over a period.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of concentration in the media about, whether the Oireachtas will suggest to the government to introduce an increase in carbon tax, and I think that's a potential outcome, all right, based on where people are at. But there's so much more to this report over and above just talking about a carbon tax, because it's about financing climate action that needs to happen. We have to change behaviour if we're to protect the environment for future generations, and that's why the children are so rightly engaged, because they see the current crop of custodians of the environment being lethargic in making the kind of behavioural change that's necessary. So it's not just for government. We have to instill in all society, everyone, we all have a role to play in changing our behaviour, and the government will have to lead on that. Carbon pricing is part of that, but it's only a small part of it. In terms of setting appropriate targets, in terms of the government having a whole-of-government approach, and this report will recommend, without any contentious element to it, that the Taoiseach's office takes over that coordinating role, and that all future policies are appropriately costed on the basis of the impact on the environment. So these are big issues. We have to look at agriculture and how we assist in terms of, on the one hand, continuing to produce good food, which is needed in Ireland and is part of our exports, but looking at land management in a way that, has the capacity to take carbon out of the atmosphere, because agricultural land and forestry has capacity to do that. We have to look at anaerobic digestion, which is using the...
Sorry, Timmy, for cutting across you, but like I said to you at the committee, when it comes to agriculture, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael closed down their ears. There was a statement originally in the report saying that we are proud and renowned for our low agricultural emissions. I got that removed because it is just not factually correct.
Yeah,
and there was big resistance to its removal, because I think some of the parties don't want to look at the fact that 1/3 of all our emissions come from agriculture, and we need to radically change how we farm and what we produce and how we produce it. But we have to do it in a way that is just to the farming
and I know
community.
a little bit about farming, coming from a small farm, but we've got to move this debate beyond the academics and the environmentalists, who have done really important work in getting this on the agenda. But when you broaden that out to the wider economy, when you see the extent to which there are so many people depending on the agricultural sector as a way of life, and also in terms of food production, that has to be part of ensuring that we change in a careful and coordinated way. And it's fine for you or others, and I have huge respect for you, and you know that, but you can't just with the stroke of a pen eliminate the agricultural sector overnight. But there are some that seeks to suggest that
there was no stroke of the pen. Even getting a factual change to the text was a big fight with the parties.
I want to ask you a question.
It's about issues at the end of the day, and it's about change, and it's about having meaningful dialogue with proper outputs.
I want to go back to just get a little bit more specific, get away from some of the broad strokes we've had up to now, but just on the question of the carbon tax increase, which, if it is delivered along the line suggested, could put up the price of a bag of coal by €7.20, or the fill up of a car, average car with petrol or diesel, by €12. Now, is that something that you would propose, or support, I should say?
Sean, I am fully in favour of a tax on carbon, and I've argued this at the committee, but they haven't accepted it. The tax should go on the profits of the fossil fuel industry and the giant corporations who are totally reliant on the production of carbon, and who then pass on the problem to the rest of the planet. And that's another demand the children are making tomorrow, is to tackle the
Are
corporations.
you saying that
and
those
the fossil
taxes
fuel
can go up
industry.
without the price of the product going up?
Well, I'm no financial. I'm no expert at financial mechanisms, but we're able to lower taxes on corporations in this country and produce mechanisms like the double Irish and the this, that, and the other that allow them to get away with paying taxes. Surely we could find ways of taxing their profits. That means that they can't put up the price of the products, because they make billions, and the top 5 companies that make the biggest profits in this country are reliant on fossil fuels, like aviation, like the petrol giants, etc. And that's why we say that taxing ordinary people doesn't cut the mustard, because how do you say to somebody who cannot afford to lag their attic or do a wraparound on their house, but aren't poor enough to get a grant from the SEAI, that you must change your behaviour? You stop turning on the gas and the electricity to heat yourself. You're old people, you need the heat, you can't afford it, it's your problem. Behavioural change has to be led by the state, and it has to be led by taxing the profits.
And I support what Brid is talking about in terms of the people who haven't the capacity to change and would be impacted very negatively by the imposition of an increase in the price of carbon. And that's why the report calls on the government to have a review completed by June of 2019 into fuel poverty, so that we can identify the elements in society that would be most affected by an increase in...
That was my proposal, by the way.
And that's why, but it's included, Brid, and it's there for a very good reason, so that it informs policy thereafter, so that the people who cannot have an alternative to heating their home with coal and oil, that they're supported through this, and that it doesn't negatively impact on them. But for those who can, and for whom there is alternatives about deep retrofitting of their homes, better insulation, that we encourage that, and that the monies collected through the taxation are provided to them to get away from their dependence on carbon.
You don't have to be very poor not to be able to afford to retrofit your home. A lot of middle-income Ireland will not be able to afford to do this. A lot of middle-income Ireland cannot afford...
But if the funds are ring-fenced, can they not be sort of recycled to help people get over those difficulties?
That's one way of doing it, but the problem is that in the course of doing it, you're hitting ordinary people again. The better way is to...
But if you get a cheque back in the post at the end of the year...
But what's the point in that? Taking it off you and giving it back to you. What is the point in that? The cost of administering that alone, I just find that really silly. By the way, it doesn't reduce carbon emissions. And this is one of the problems we had at the committee. A study was given to us from the ERSI, which was totally dominated by economists, to say that carbon taxes work. There are other studies that show that it doesn't actually lead to reduction in emissions. And there's a key study from British Columbia, which has always been wheeled out as the model, which we didn't even look at. We spent very little time actually talking about
I'm looking here at the front page story. Niamh Lyons has it in the Times Ireland edition, where she quotes from an ESRI report. Now, admittedly, it's only a sentence that I have here. A carbon tax should incentivise households to decarbonise without making them worse off. One way of achieving this is to recycle the revenues from the carbon tax back to the households. You say that's not practical.
It doesn't work, Sean. It certainly doesn't work in a society to help reduce our overall emissions. We have to go after the industry who produce the carbon, the fossil fuel industry, the plastic industry, and big agriculture. I'm not talking about attacking small farmers and the farmers Timmy represents. I'm talking about the sort of the big guys, and I don't want to use names here. But there's
always a there's always a boogeyman out there.
They're not boogeymen.
They're
very wealthy people.
But they employ a lot of people.
One of them is just on the tip of being worth about $1 billion, and is subsidised by this state to the tune of $250,000 every year.
They employ a phenomenal amount of people in an industry that you just can't change overnight.
Well,
go back to the question
of just transition.
Let's hear Timmy Dooley for a minute, please.
Brid and I are at one on this particular issue, that the fee and dividend is a gimmick. Like, if you're going to introduce a carbon levy and you notionally then are going to send everybody back a cheque, sure, that's not in any way incentivising a behavioural change approach.
We're not at one on carbon taxes.
Well, no, I accept that, but on that aspect of it. Whereas the Fianna Fáil's view, as highlighted by Micheál Martin at the RTE, is very much around any monies that come through charging for carbon are ring-fenced, and we wanted
Well, take
ring-fenced
them
in
off the fossil
legislation.
fuel industry.
Can I finish, please? That's ring-fenced in legislation, and that money is then used to assist people in weaning them off fossil fuels and weaning them off carbon and assisting them with upgrading their homes. Well, look, it's my view, and there's a body of science and evidence behind it.
When will this report come out and people be able to look at it and assess it?
The 28th of March is the
I think there is going to be.
date.
I think it is going to be 2 days after we come back.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today. But what Timmy just said is nonsense. People's individual behaviour is not the problem, and you cannot move to a warmer house that you don't need to burn gas in without support and without the changes being made. You can't.
And the money has to come from
move
somewhere,
to
and
drive
I'm suggesting
an
that that's how
electric
we
car
do it.
because they're very expensive. And by the way, there's no infrastructure in this state for electric cars.
And the report talks about that, Brid, and you know it does. It talks about using the monies to roll out the
regular, frequent and free public transport. One of my proposals that you've all rejected. Oh, crazy. Free public transport, you couldn't do that. By the way, that's what they're moving to.
Luxembourg have already done that. And I'd love to be able to come forward with suggestions about all of these things. They're ambitious, and somebody has to pay for them, and unfortunately you haven't identified how they're going to be paid for.
And it's unambitious for what the challenge that is facing us. The kids get it. We don't get it in Dáil Éireann. At least yous don't get it. I get it. The kids get it.
Thank you both indeed for coming in. Brid Smith, TD, People Before Profit for Dublin South Central, and also it's a